record. There we go. Ah. Okay, welcome our attendees. Our today's panel discussion is called Social Skills Groups at University Counseling Centers. This event is being put on by the AGPA, College Counseling and Other Educational Settings, SIG. My name is Kseniya Zhuzha. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I will be serving as a moderator for today's panel. So I'm a psychologist and the group therapy coordinator at the University of Nevada, Reno Counseling Services. I'm also the education chair of the AGPA College Counseling SIG. And I'm connecting to you today from Reno, Nevada, which is the traditional territory of the Washoe and Northern Paiute Nations. We're joined today by three speakers on this panel. Dr. Andrew Facemire, who is a resident in psychology at Virginia Tech Cook Counseling Center. Then we have Dr. Hilary Son, who is a psychologist and a clinical director at the University of Nevada, Reno Counseling Services, where I'm also at. Finally got somebody from a university on my panel. And last but not least, Dr. Ayanna Towers, who is a psychologist and the acting assistant director of training at the Rutgers Counseling, Alcohol, and Other Drug Assistance and Psychiatric Services. So welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for being with me today, and welcome all of our guests. So before we begin, and I'll let our panelists take the reins, I would like to give a brief overview of Zoom and the format of this event. So automatic live captioning is enabled, and you can usually turn it on and off by selecting the closed captions icon on the navigation panel at the bottom of your screen. So if you need it, turn it on. If you don't need it, turn it off at your discretion. So your microphone will be muted automatically for this presentation. It is right now, but you are able to unmute yourself if you need to. We selected this option to eliminate the background noise, which can be disruptive for the presentation. And if you're seeing myself and our panelists in the center of your screen, you are in speaker view, and that is the recommended view for this webinar. But you can switch to gallery view at your discretion, which will allow you to see all participants or multiple participants on the screen. To switch between views, you can usually click on the view icon at the top right corner of your screen and select the view that you'd like. This webinar is being recorded. Once it is uploaded on YouTube, it usually happens like within a month after the event. I cannot unfortunately give specific timeline. It's not completely up to me. All of you will receive an email link with the recording when that happens. And whoops. Alrighty, and a few words about how our today's program is structured. So for the first hour, panelists will talk about groups they lead, groups that focus specifically on building social skills for students and answer questions that I've prepared for them. And then last 30 minutes of the event will be devoted to questions from the audience. So this meeting has Q&A feature on the navigation panel at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to submit your questions there during the presentation, but please keep in mind that they will not be answered until the Q&A portion. And please keep in mind that unfortunately not all questions will be answered due to limited time, but I'll do my best to select questions that feel most relevant and that pop up for most individuals. All right, so that's my introduction. I'm also going to post these instructions in the chat in just a moment. But with that, I'll turn it over to Hilary to begin our discussion panel and tell us about the social skills group she leads at UNR.
Hi, everybody. As Kseniya said, my name is Hilary. I am the clinical director and a psychologist at the UNR Counseling Center in Reno, Nevada, which is where I am in this moment. It is situated on the traditional homelands of the Washoe and the Paiute peoples. We have a student body of just under 22,000, and we lead a bunch of different kinds of groups here. I think Kseniya can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we offered like 22 groups last semester or something like that. So we offer a lot of groups. They're very popular among our students as well as among our staff. Our staff really overall enjoy leading groups. I would say a majority of our staff lead between 1 and 3 groups, some of them even more than that. We have a wide variety of types of groups that we offer here. We offer quite a few different kinds of process groups. So we offer, I think, usually between 2 to 4 interpersonal process groups. Those could be grad focused or undergrad or mixed. We offer a interpersonal process group where we incorporate exercise to help with behavioral activation and manage symptoms of depression and anxiety. We offer a process group where there's Dungeons and Dragons played, and we get feedback on that. Kseniya leads a family patterns group, which is also a process, and then some psychodrama. And then we have a lot of skills groups as well. We offer DBT, anxiety skills, perfectionist no more, and then my group relationship skills that I'm going to be talking about today, and then some others depending on who's around and what interests people have. We have some like academic motivation type groups. Those have been like ADHD coaching type skills groups, as well as support groups that we offer. We offer a number of different support groups. Those change by semester, by year as well. We have an international student one, and then some for different like identities. Café con Pan is for Latinx students, Climate Cafe. So wide variety of groups here, and they're pretty popular among our students. The group that I am talking about today is going to be Relationship Skills Group. This is a 6-week skills group for students here at the university, and it focuses on increasing their awareness of their emotions. Probably all of you know that often our students don't know what they're feeling, and they get a little bit flooded when they have a hard time labeling what emotion is coming up for them, and then they don't know what to do with it. So we're just helping them learn what their emotions are and how to label them and how to notice them in their bodies. We learn strategies for maintaining emotional safety in relationships. So once they know their emotions, how do they express them and stay safe in their expression of their emotions and practice healthy but safe vulnerability within their relationships. So connected with that is practicing deepening relationships in their expression of their emotions. So those are kind of like our core focuses of this group. And we do this through some insight, increasing through teaching skills of like how to notice emotion, and then through practicing within the group setting as well as homework. So I started this group last summer. And so far I've run it every single semester, twice a semester. So because it's 6 weeks, we're able to repeat it twice. And that's really nice because often, as many of you know, in college counseling centers, our groups fill up and then we're like, oh, these people would really benefit from group, and there's nothing to refer to. So we have quite a few groups that do this 6-week rotation so that there's something mid-semester that we can fill. Usually I'll lead it with a trainee. We have a co-leader model. We always have a co-leader for groups, and typically trainees kind of get first dibs on getting to co-lead. It's not that I couldn't lead it with a permanent staff member. It's that usually trainees are like, yeah, we want group experience. And so I've typically always led it with a trainee. We have a bunch of different kinds of trainees here: practicum, internship, postdoc, from social work, MFT, or CPC and social work. Oh, psych. That's the other one. Anyway, usually these sessions are 50 minutes. We market it for an hour, but I always wrap up at about the 10-minute mark, and then we meet weekly for those 6 weeks. The group is closed. So after the first session, we usually close the group, but there have been times where I've left it open just because maybe someone's like, oh, this student would so benefit. Is there any way they can join, second session, because I couldn't get them in the first, and I'll be flexible with that. So we've done that a couple times. Usually I will catch the student up, either I or my co-leader will kind of run them through the first session one-on-one, and then they'll join after that. And that's worked pretty well. I've already mentioned I've offered it for a year. I sent out a bunch of the handouts, which Kseniya will be sending to you all. And I mentioned that it's advertised, I think, on our website. We advertise that there. We also have lots of referrals by our clinical staff. We use referral lists on Titanium, And so usually they'll just be a list and I'll email them all and be like, hey, do you still want to do this group? And they'll respond and I'll get them in. And then we'll also have like referrals from outside departments if we like posted our flyers or send them out to different places. They can sign up themselves or their therapist can refer them, or if they're not even a client, they can directly email me and I might let them come to the group, even not having been a client originally. Usually we have between 3 to 10 members. I've capped it at 10. I've never had 10, but that's kind of where I've capped it. The most that I've ever had when running this group is 8. I'll talk about some of the challenges later, but it is hard to keep groups filled when they're skills groups like this, I think. There's a little bit less of connection, and so there's a little less buy-in sometimes. Trying to think if I missed anything on this. So I'll outline kind of what we do in this group. I'm going to share screen. So I'm going to start with a group agreement because I think that gives a good introduction for what we tell our students. We're very, very clear that this is a skills group. This is not a process group. So we really don't spend a lot of time like processing through reactions or emotions. There's a little bit of room for that, but that's not the focus of this group. And because of that, one of the key things I highlight, which is in the group guidelines and agreement, is that we don't share details about things that could potentially be triggering for other members. And it's okay to share like about an experience in broad terms, but we don't process through like the details of a difficult experience. We go over this our very first session with our students, have an opportunity for them to ask questions. We do the usual talk about privacy, and then our confidentiality that we have to maintain. We talk about how they need to be present every single week. It's only 6 weeks long, and if they miss more than 2, they just aren't going to get the benefit. If they miss 2, they are automatically removed from the group, and they're told that up front. Usually, if they miss 1,
Hilary, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind making it a little bigger?
A little bigger, yeah. I'm going to just zoom in. Okay, it's better?
Yeah, much better.
Usually if they miss one group, I will email them and be like, hey, you missed group, hope everything's okay. I'll send them the stuff that they missed for that day. One of our students last semester gave us feedback. Hey, I always lose all the handouts you give me. It would be really helpful if I could have those electronically. And so since then, we every week send out the electronic copies in addition to giving them their paper copies. And the students have really liked that. So we'll email the students regardless of if they're there or not with the handouts. And then if they've missed, we'll let them know like, hey, you missed, hope we see you, hope everything's okay. Reminder, like if you missed 2, you'll be removed from the group. We ask them not to be late. That's always a struggle for our students. And then if they have a planned absence, to just let the group know. Really, right, the most that they engage in the group, the most they're going to get out of it. But we want people to engage in a way that's safe for them. I actually usually don't use the word comfortable. I say safe. I'm going to be like, it's going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes you're going to be practicing skills that you're not used to, but we want you to feel safe and like you won't be emotionally in danger in some way. And then we ask that they practice their skills outside of group because it's only 1 hour a week. And therefore, if they're not practicing outside, they probably won't get as much benefit. And then we talk about their options if they're at risk in some way, and then talk about respecting other members. I'm going to share the outline of how the group goes and what we see as the leaders. And I will make this bigger as well. Okay. So it's pretty basic. I usually do like a 30-minute to an hour rundown with my co-leader to give them more details because it's a pretty basic outline. But the first week, we introduce the emotion wheel. So we talk about what is emotion, what's the purpose of emotion, what are some challenges with recognizing emotions, why might those come up? And then we talk about the triangle of conflict. I can only see a few people. Any of you heard of a triangle of conflict? some, not many, some. Okay, so the triangle of conflict, it's a really old psychodynamic type thing, but it's basically talking about which emotions we tend to avoid and why we develop defenses around them. It's the idea of like we have affect phobia. We'll become phobic of an emotion that we maybe got really negative feedback around throughout our lives. So like a common example I'll use in this group, I'll draw out the triangle and I'll be like, yeah, like, what do you notice any emotions on the emotion wheel that you tend not to feel? Often that might be because we've been taught not to feel that emotion in some way, shape, or form. So I'll use like the example of anger, and then I'll like play through a fake person who doesn't show anger and what's the impact of that. They don't set boundaries, they don't ask for their needs. And then they develop, anxiety or depression or whatever symptoms because they're not actually acting on emotion that has an appropriate and healthy function, and they're missing out on that function. But it really isn't their fault. They were taught not to feel that emotion, so we develop a lot of compassion around that. Students love this part. They're like, oh my gosh, that's me. Oh my goodness, I didn't know. So we talk about the ways that they keep that emotion at bay, and then we talk about how to like notice that they're keeping it at bay.
Hilary, given that, this may be like a concept not necessarily familiar to all participants, would it be possible to just send maybe like a handout?
I could send
I know,
handout.
you have the materials from that, so we don't spend time on that because we need to move on.
Yeah, I'll do that. We do power and control wheel, and then we do equality wheel. We talk about different levels of vulnerability. Then we go into exploring emotional and relational patterns more. We have them do an art project that day. We talk about benefits and drawbacks of being vulnerable, and they do an art project where they do their own triangle of conflict in a conversation they want to have with someone. We tell them don't have that conversation because we want to make sure you're safe first, but there's like imagine it out and what feelings come up. Then they share it the next week. We talk a lot about culture and cultural norms and how this applies or doesn't apply based on their context. We do a trust star. So they fill in like different ways that they can trust or not trust others. And then we start practicing skills in group. We teach them dear man and I language, and they go through this in pairs. Sometimes we'll do 3 depending on the makeup of the group. If we do 3, we have one person give feedback while they observe a pair. Do this. Week 5, we do deepening connections. They do an imago handout, which you'll get, but it's basically one person does I statements and the other person practices active listening. And then we consolidate, we give them homework of thinking about goodbyes, what patterns they have in goodbyes, experiences of goodbyes, and then they come in and we do a vulnerable goodbye where we share emotions with each other and use I statements and talk about how the course of the group has been. And we do an activity where they write their name on a card and everyone writes a word that they kind of like think represents that person's really sweet and they really enjoy that. That's our group.
Very cool. Looks like a pretty full curriculum. I look forward to asking you more questions about it in a little bit. But let's hear from Ayanna and what kind of social skills groups that you do at Rutgers.
Okay, so my name's Ayanna Towers. I'm the counseling psychologist at Rutgers University. Our counseling center, CAPS, is what we're referred to. So Rutgers University is a very large university in New Jersey. 82% of our students are from New Jersey who attend here. Our student body is over 67,000 students from all 50 states, from more than 120 countries. So we have a lot of students here. As far as demographics, predominantly white, then Asian, then Hispanic, then international, and then African American, as far as most to least. And so I've been running this group. I run the relationship skills group at Rutgers University. I've been running it for 5 years now. And so this group is definitely a group where I've really seen just sort of the transformation of students and really appreciate just the level of change that I see, and not even in just in skills per se, but just more so of self-confidence. And that's what I really strive for in this group. So at Rutgers, at CAPS, we run a lot of different types of groups, process groups, We run skills-based groups, DBT. We run a lot of affinity groups based on identity. We run different groups as just really hoping, and I say hoping because there's so many different issues that come up with such a large student population. We're challenged in a lot of ways because we're always coming up with new themed groups based on just the need and what we see our students coming in with. So we're always thinking and always being creative. So like I said, I run the relationship skills group, and this is the group that runs for 10 weeks. And so the group runs per semester. So I'm a 10-month employee, so I'm only here fall and spring semesters. So I run the group in the fall. That goes for 10 weeks. And the groups are typically about, well, we start off with, I'll say what we start off with. We can get a lot of referrals, but that's not to say that that's who shows up to the group. So we can get so excited about the number of referrals we get. But then, like Dr. Son was mentioning before, sometimes the groups it's smaller than sort of what was projected. And so we may start off with like 15, but then the group will consistently have about 6 to 8. And so that's sort of been what my experience has been like. Some days we'll only, based on what's going on in the students' life, some of them may fall off a little bit because of like exams or something. So we may get like 3 students on a day, and then the next day we'll have the full group, and then the next day it may be just like a few. So we just roll with it. This group is very flexible, and I've made it very flexible. I tried to be structured, more structured early on when I started running this group, but I realized the flexibility is highly appreciated by the students. We try to close the group after a few sessions, but we've had students and clinicians who really say like, oh, can the student come in? And so we'll make recommendations like, oh, well, the group runs again next semester, so hopefully maybe next semester, if they don't mind coming in after 3 sessions. So the clinician who is ever referring will say like, okay, that's thank you for letting me know. I'll ask the student if they are comfortable coming in after 2 or 3 sessions, knowing how many sessions there are. And so that's sort of how I frame it, but I don't give like a hard no, especially because there's some students who just need an outlet and just want something for that semester. So like I said, I grew very flexibly. It's not as, there's not a rigid or strict structure to it. It's pretty much what the student comes in with. So I do screenings early on. So all the students who are interested I use a screening form in order to find out what the student really needs. And I sort of work from there to see how I structure the group based on that. And each group that I run with the student, if something else comes up that's like a common theme, I will then tailor the next group for that. So it's nothing that's like, okay, this week I'm doing this week I'm doing that. It's like me and my co-facilitator would say like, oh, you notice how the group mentioned this. I feel like next week we can really tap into that a little bit deeper to really get a little bit more clarity and form a little bit more. So as far as not being structured, it could be very processy if it needs to be, and it could be very skills-based if it needs to be. And I'm able to pivot, and that's just like my brain. I'm someone who can pivot and sort of do different things within one group. So I can, I do a lot of coaching in this session with the student. I do a lot of work. I'm certified as clinical specialist with autism and ADHD. So there's aspects of just like my training that I can incorporate with the students, especially those who may be on the spectrum or who may suspect that they are on the spectrum. A lot of the students don't have to be on the spectrum. A lot of them are not, but they do have a lot of social challenges. A lot of them may be diagnosed, a lot of them with autism, ADHD, a lot of neurodivergence that I get in my groups, which we totally welcome and highly encourage for there to be a space to work on social challenges. We may get students who have a history of bullying, who may just have like some anxiety and just don't know how to talk to people and just really want some support. We have some issues regarding acculturation. So some students, we have a lot of international students, and sometimes they just do not know how to socialize, and they just really do not feel confident socializing. Some students have said like they don't even know what small talk, what is that? What's the purpose of that? They notice that in America, we do small talk, they don't get it. And so some students are just really just like, yeah, I don't even understand. I don't want to talk about just the weather. And so for those students who really see the value in that, we talk about those things. And so again, a lot of the need is based on what the student comes in and tells me what they're struggling with after I do my screenings. And like I said, I was highly structured before, but I realized that every time I was so structured, it didn't give room for other things that the students really were wanting out of the group. And so for those 6 students, if I noticed certain things, me and my co-facilitator would say like, okay, this sort of can drive our next session. And that's sort of how we would do the group. And so the co-facilitator is usually a trainee. And so we have doctoral trainees at CAPS. We usually take on 4 a year. And so our training director will ask one of the trainees like, oh, is anyone interested in relationship skills, running a group like this? And so they would say that. Some years we've had some students say no, which is totally fine. So we'll take another staff member who wants to run the group with me. But they sort of hold that to the trainees as far as interest in that. Especially since I'm the psychologist on staff who works more so with the neurodivergent students. A lot of the trainees love the idea of getting that experience. So they say like, oh yeah, I'd love to work with Dr. Towers because she has experience with autism, ADHD. She runs a relationship skills group. So that's how we usually get, that's how I usually get my partner. It's pretty much sort of presenting that to the trainees and saying, is anyone interested? And them saying yes or no. But many times they are very highly interested in running the group with me. And so each semester, the group can look totally different. We have some returning students, but then the next semester, we can have a whole new group. So again, I do my screenings. I get my referrals from the clinicians at CAPS, or I can get the referrals from our CSP program, College Support Program. That's a group on Rutgers campus that supports students on the spectrum. And they just sort of provide them different services on campus. And one of them is my group. And so the coordinator at the CSP program will just sort of announce like, okay, CAPS is offering their relationship skills group. And so anyone who feels like they're struggling or really wants some skills with your social life, please, this is what's available to you. And so we get referrals from that. And like I said, we can have up to 15, 20, but the group doesn't, can be around 6 to 8. Trying to think of what else okay. So the groups that we typically run, specifically the relationship skills group, this is the group that I do a lot of sort of like interactive ways about it. So we do some interactions. We may incorporate some YouTube videos that may illustrate something maybe better than I do. So we try to be very selective about the types or the format in which I can get a skill out there. So I don't mind bringing in a screen and sort of providing them like some YouTube videos to sort of illustrate a particular skill.
Yeah, Ayanna, I want to ask a question to understand how like you blend the like unstructured with structure, so to speak. So like say students come into the session, and I know that at some points you may have like, oh, this topic came up, we're gonna address that today. But say if you come into the session, you don't have a predetermined agenda. Do students start interacting? Do you ask them questions? Do you give them a list of options of what they can talk about? How does that work?
Yeah, so the students, based on what I know about the students, I'm not coming in, of course, blindly about anything. In my screening, there's also another screening aspect in our EMR system that we do, where I get a little bit of experience about what they go through. I will do more introductions, and I will talk about, let's give each other, like, we'll do the guidelines, we'll talk about what it is that they struggle with, and we'll see common themes in it. And I will ask we'll sort of present more so of just like the aspect of maintaining, starting conversation, maintain conversation. Those sort of basic skills is sort of how I open it up. And from there, so the first group is really going to open it up to what I do. And so we really work on learning how to form, maintain, and improve their relationships through effective communication skills. We provide feedback and again, I can be very on the fly. So we would talk about a certain skill. I would talk about it in whatever way I can. And then I can say, okay, let's do a quick role play. And so I can do role plays randomly throughout the session. And it's something where I can ask for a volunteer, or I can pick out a volunteer, but I can do a lot in one session, and my sessions go really quickly. Because I can start off with sort of what I'm talking about as far as just the particular skill, like, oh, we're going to help you maintain and form the relationships and in the conversations. So we'll go through just their experiences with maintaining a conversation or starting one, and then we'll start pivoting into, let's do a quick role play. And it's myself and the facilitator who will actually be the first models of a role play. And so I really try to take some of that off of the student to not feel like, oh my gosh, she's going to call on me. It's more so of, okay, me and my co-facilitator, this is what it looks like to start a conversation. And we can also incorporate conversations that don't go well. So me and my facilitator can do things that, like, the do's and the sort of not so appropriate sort of conversations. So we really try to maintain a level of integration of all different styles. And I realize that, again, because of my creative mind, I can do this sort of thing. And so I just always encourage every clinician that my style is not like everyone's. A lot of people need structure. They need to know what they're going to do. I'm someone who actually works better when I know what's going on in front of me and what I feel the need is, and what I see as an opportune time to illustrate something. So those are just sort of the things that I would sort of really talk about as far as what my experience is working with my group.
Very cool. Okay. So let's hear from Andrew about social skills focus group at Virginia Tech, and then we'll do some questions for all our panelists.
All right. Let me just get my screen shared here. I'm a pretty visual person, so I like to have slides. It's here. All right. Well, glad to see everybody on the screen here. I'm Andrew. My pronouns are he, him, his. I work at Cook Counseling Center at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. We're located in southwestern Virginia. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about a group that I do here called Roll for Insight. So here's our land acknowledgement and labor recognition. We acknowledge that we live and work on the Tulalone and Monacan people's homeland, and that the Smithfield and Saltwood plantations were previously on the sites of our campuses. So acknowledgement to the past peoples. Virginia Tech is an R1 state university in Southwest Virginia. We have about 37,000 students between our main and satellite campuses, between our grad and undergrad programs. Our prominent colleges include engineering, architecture, veterinary medicine, and many, many more. We're also a senior military college. We have a Corps of Cadets that trains on site as well. And we are Division I in NCAA, so athletics is a big part of the campus culture. See all these lovely pictures of our environment here. At our counseling center, in terms of social skills offerings, we offer the group I'll be talking about today. We do a variety of different understanding self and others groups as well. That's got to be our most common offering. Occasionally we would do social skills workshops, and I believe in the past we've done some more relationship skills groups. It's really just depended on counseling center demand and client need, and of course COVID knocked out a lot of our group offerings, so we're coming back up from that. Outside the center, we have a fabulous project called the Connection Project, which is run from Hokie Wellness. They encourage vulnerable conversations and deeper conversations beyond small talk for a lot of students. So I send a lot of people over there. We also have our field support groups, which are open support groups for all students, grad and undergrad. And usually there's some form of programming going on university-wide. So we have a lot of different resources that we shared with our students. In terms of my own group, Role for Insight is usually semester long, sometimes year long if we have a consistent number of clients. This semester, and I think the last one as well, we ran 2 concurrent groups. That's probably the most that I've had at the same time, but we could easily have a third one. It's been a popular group. Usually it's about 12 to 14 sessions, and we focus on social skills training and managing social anxiety. It is a blend of kind of tabletop role-playing gameplay and social skills interpersonal process. So we play with being structured and also taking away the structure constantly. So it's a little bit embracing chaos, but interacting with other humans can also be rather chaotic. So we try to embrace that. We usually have 2 facilitators, one who kind of takes the role of the game master, kind of the narrator, the rules lawyer, the person who facilitates the gameplay, and also group interactions, and the player who is my co-facilitator. They are either full staff or one of our fabulous interns or prac students. And they get to kind of be my inside person in some sense of the word. If we need to practice a specific role play for the particular player or demonstrate a certain skill or get the game moving, I kind of operate from the outside and they get to work from the inside and make some really good interplay. So we often have about 4 to 8 clients per group. We had a crazy amount of clients in this last semester. We kind of front loaded with like 12 and ended up with 5 at the end, but that was honestly perfect for us. Our groups are weekly, lasting about 2 hours. We usually start with more of an emotion-focused check-in where we practice paying attention to what's happening in our minds and bodies and sharing what we're feeling, what's coming into the game for us, what we'd like to get out of the session. Then we transition into our gameplay portion, which usually takes about 50 to 90 minutes, followed by a more kind of like Yalom style process group debrief, which could be 30 minutes up to 60. We're pretty flexible. If folks need to take more time in group, we allow for it. It's kind of a constant zipping in and zipping out of the different parts each time. And another thing that I've played with a little bit more is keeping the group open. So that's kind of intentional by design, something that I shared with one group this last semester when they were asking me like, hey, why are we bringing in new people at this point? I'm like, I told them, well, it's actually kind of an intentional exposure. So for one thing, you're going to get to practice meeting somebody new and bringing somebody new into the group. Because a lot of the members have specific anxiety around meeting new people. And for the new person, it's integrating into a new group or breaking into a new space, since that's often one of the most vulnerable tasks for a lot of our students. So maybe at some point we'll consider deviating, but I like to challenge the group members in that way. So curriculum is very loose, but I'll share kind of the consistent things that we have every year. On our onboarding kind of process, everything starts with our individual group intakes. During that, we explore goals. We talk about the different social skills that folks want to practice or that they feel lacking in. We talk about maybe things that make them nervous about socializing, connecting with other people. Then we talk about different ways to play characters to achieve those goals. I'll go a little bit more into that, but I'll loosely say a lot of our targeted interventions are actually kind of client-centered. Whenever we create characters, we encourage them to practice the specific skills that they want to improve in. In our first session, it's kind of our session 0 for folks who are familiar with RPGs. We orient folks to group, we create norms, talk about expectations, review our goals, engage in kind of this collaborative world building and story building exercise. Whenever we gather together for group, I'm not the only one who tells the story. Folks get to tell me what kind of things they want to see or what kind of encounters, what kind of challenges they want to face. So we try to be very open-ended in that, make it a mutual process. In the next couple sessions, we really get into kind of like workshopping characters. So we put a lot into the character making, as I mentioned. We guide and assist creating therapy-driven characters, although to an extent, all characters can be therapy-driven if you use them the right way. And we engage in more interactive tutorials and kind of going over the rules of the game, explaining how to use the game in a therapeutic way, since it's a little bit different from playing socially, just a little bit. And throughout the rest of the year, we enter into our therapeutic role play. So we play the game until the end of the semester or the academic year and do our kind of big glass boss battle at the end of the session or at the end of the game. And me and my co-facilitator might spotlight different member problems or create different encounters for folks, depending on maybe like what the most common needs are, or if somebody needs to be pulled in a little bit more. It's a fun process, really flexible. So here's a little bit about how we navigate character creation. I have kind of 4 different tropes that I go with. So for instance, if somebody comes in and says, I want to be more confident in speaking in front of people, we might encourage them to play a character who does that a lot more. Someone who might be like the charming or funny one, or uses their voice, kind of like if you're using D&D terms, somebody who plays like a bard or a character that performs. They want to practice taking initiative or leadership, we encourage them to play a character who's more assertive or takes charge, tries to put themselves out in front of others. In terms of the D&D, that can be a paladin or a fighter. One thing to note is you can play a character any way you'd like to. So really just setting this into your character's personality is big. If you want to work on communication skills, how can we get you in like diplomacy kind of settings? How can we get you regularly interacting with the other players in front of like the non-player characters? And if you want to explore identity or gender, this is another fun kind of goal that we get a lot of. Folks can try playing a character who reflects the kind of person they want to be or who they identify with. A lot of folks use this to try on different pronouns, try on preferred names. And I've even had some folks who are working on transitioning and use this as a little bit of vocal training. It's really fun. So in terms of group topics, again, totally depends on the group, but our common topics include making social connection with others. This is kind of more of a USO oriented group a lot of the time. So we do try to build that group cohesion pretty early on with kind of that game aspect. I've noticed it builds up rather quickly. I think people drop their guards when it becomes a game rather than for doing treatment. We work on building emotional awareness and expression. I come at things from an emotion-focused lens a lot of the time. So we always work to identify what we're feeling in the given moment and what we need to express. Communication skills is a given. You can't play the game without communicating with other people. So we are constantly practicing good communication. I encourage a lot of risk-taking and behavioral experimentation. So like, what's going to happen if I tell a joke right now? What's going to happen if I make this choice in the game? We can always zip in and out, say like, okay, you just did that. And how did it feel? And also, if it was threatening to you, we were just playing a game. So we can both flex between you actually did something and this is a skill you're developing. And also, it's not that big of a deal if it went badly. Mentioned identity exploration. We practice a lot of empathy and perspective taking. Playing a character requires you to put yourself in that person's shoes and also relate to other people who are putting themselves in people's shoes. So it's multiple levels of doing that. Impulse control and recognizing cause and effect comes into play a lot. You've got to wait your turn a lot of the time in things like combat or things like role play. Obviously, collaboration. A lot of the role-playing games are never competitive. It's usually a mutual team-based thing where the goal is to tell a story together. So we are really pro collaboration, working together. And of course, creative and personal expression. That's maybe one of my favorite parts of the group and what kind of drives me in this direction. And last but not least, our big goals are to build emotional and self-awareness, build social confidence and improve communication and social skills, to build empathy and perspective taking, improve our ability to connect with others, be aware of verbal and nonverbal communication, practicing, recognizing both, and yeah, taking risks, role-playing, acting, sharing vulnerable feelings, being curious, showing interest in others and their characters, really diving into the group and seeing what you can get out of it. I always tell folks, the more you put into it, the more that you get out.
Thank you for this amazing visual, Andrew. It's a very well explained, such a complex, such a complex group in a short period of time. Appreciate you. I also saw through the chat came in a message from Jackie, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, that there is tabletop role-playing game collaboration that's happening among college counseling centers organized by RIT. So check in the chat if you want to connect with people. Now, I know that some of our participants may be leaving after an hour, not able to stay for the full duration. So I'm going to post a couple of things in the chat before we continue. We do have a very short feedback survey that I would love for you all to complete. Here it comes to everyone. There we go. And then our college counseling SIG through AGPA does offer free consultation groups. And there are groups that will be happening over the summer. They're organized by Vinny DeHilly. So, whoops, I think I just sent the same thing, didn't I? Sorry, my copy did not work. One moment. So again, these consult groups are free. You can you sign up, you pick then you're assigned to a particular day that the group is happening, and then you can ask questions. You can talk about how to build the group culture in your center, things like that. So it's a great resource. So if you're interested, please sign up. Okay, so we're gonna turn to questions for our panelists. I will do a couple of questions and then we'll turn into the audience. And remember that you can submit your questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your panel. All right, so let's see what I got for y'all. So what I'm curious about is, Ayanna, I feel like you spoke about this for yourself in terms of why you chose the format that you did for your group. But I'm curious, why did you decide to offer the specific type of format of the group, knowing that there's different formats exist, right? Like there's skills for social anxiety, there's specifically social skills training for ASD, there's interpersonal process groups. So what led you to develop and offer the specific group that you're offering? And Hilary, why don't you start us off, and then we'll hear from Andrew and Ayanna in that order.
Sure. As I mentioned at the beginning, we offer a ton of different kinds of process groups, and those are often a huge piece of our treatment plan for students and can address so many different issues that students come in with. And what we noticed is that sometimes for a lot of students, jumping straight into a process group was outside their window of tolerance and maybe didn't lead to as much growth as if they had had a few individual sessions to kind of start building insight about their patterns, understanding themselves, having compassion on themselves. And so we thought, why not create a group with the goal of prepping students for their next step in treatment, so that that's not all just happening in individual therapy, and we can have a group context to kind of give them those insights into themselves. We also have noticed that we are having higher numbers, it seems like, of neurodiverse students, often students with ASD diagnoses coming into our center. And we at this time didn't have a social skills group for ASD, but we wanted to capture the most possible. And so we created this group with those main goals in mind, I would say. And we chose skills groups so that it could be reoccurring.
Yeah, it's nice to get 2 sections in 1 semester. Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, I'd say for me, and I'll give a little primer here because I saw a question in chat about what a TTRPG is. So tabletop role-playing game. The usual example is Dungeons and Dragons. It's essentially just kind of a collaborative storytelling game mixed with rolling some dice, crunching some numbers. It's usually in a fantasy setting. And kind of moving into that, I sent along a handout with a lot of information about that. So if you're curious about what those are and how we can use them as therapy, definitely recommend checking out some of the links. So growing up, I have kind of like a personal example of why I chose to do this group, and then the clinical side. So the clinical side, I think just about everybody who does these kinds of groups says at one point or another playing role-playing games helped them as a child or an adult. I was no different. I was pretty socially anxious growing up, and something that I really caught on to as I started training in psychology was just that playing role-playing games with my friends helped me practice a lot of vulnerability, got me comfortable speaking in front of other people and acting and things like that. Gave me some emotionally corrective experiences based on how I played the character, like the feedback I was getting in groups. Gave me a good outlet and catharsis during hard times, and regularly gave me a reason to socialize with others. It pushed me to get out of my bedroom and talk with other people. So for a lot of folks, it can be a safe space to try on different identities, social skills, and roles. And turns out a lot of people agree, because now there's quite a few groups that do this kind of work. I've listed a couple in the handout as well, so definitely check them out. One article that I love and reference a lot says that the therapy in these groups is simply playing the game and pointing out like what you did every time. There's a lot of things that are just naturally baked into role-playing games. It's almost the same as you could say for drama therapy or through art therapy. Ultimately, I'm seeking to give others the same sort of experience that role-playing games gave me. So on the clinical side of things, I see this kind of group as kind of like the drama therapy, the Yalom therapy of more social skills work programs. We do a lot of the same things, but in a creatively expressive, less directive way. I think that the success that we've seen, clients keep coming to this group because they find it really engaging. We target a lot of special interests for a lot of people, a lot of hobbies. And for people coming to therapy for the first time or people who've been resistant to therapy, it's kind of a lower barrier of entry, less intimidating for a lot. And we do emphasize kind of community and taking the game with them after they leave. A lot of folks come together and still play the game afterwards, and that's always really charming to see.
Yes, I really appreciate just the level of the diversified way in which I do this group, because I found that there was so much more freedom and just sort of tailoring it to the to students who were more like did want more like process sort of things in it, and then those students who also wanted like more skills based, and found ways in which I can incorporate both of those in there, and really telling students this is to whatever degree you feel comfortable and safe doing. And so no student comes in feeling like they need to talk about all their rejections, but we do have some students who want to talk about their rejections in group. And so I really was just like kind of caught off guard when sometimes I didn't have a response immediately, because I'm just like, okay, I'm not their individual therapist and this is a group space. So I just found myself over these 5 years just like really thinking about ways that I can respond in a way that's very validating for that student who wants to say how hurtful it is when they're rejected all the time, and then also make it so that those who are around them hearing this also feels like I can really confidently address that particular thing, and then open it up to the group if anyone else wants to add to it. So I found like a way about, or like an art to it. And again, this took time. There was like an art to being able to cater to different needs in a group. And like I said, sometimes I am thrown a little bit off guard because someone may say something very like out there, or like, oh, this is something that happened to me. And it sort of like brings down the group. And then we're just like, oh, okay, let me see how I can think on my feet real quick and respond in a way that, again, really acknowledges everyone in the room. When I have trainees there, I find that they look to me for that. So there's some pressure on me because the trainee who's co-facilitating with me is just like, okay, I would not know how to answer that question. And good thing I have you to sort of take care of that. So I really try to incorporate role plays because I find it fun. Sometimes we get great laughs because we want to make sure that we see the fun and just sort of doing things that can be messy at times. And so I really want them to know that this is not a group to sort of say like, this is how you need to be, because there's so many social constructs, and I don't want to feed them like, this is what you need to be in public, or this is what you need to say in public, or to be, or to fit in. I want them to know like, these are some skills that I can teach you to the extent that you are able to go out there and use them. Hopefully these can enhance the relationships or that you already have, or help you build new ones. And so I sort of really hone that into them, as far as like, I want you to preserve your authentic self. I want you to be able to share what you enjoy, share your interest, know that you can share it with this group, and the people who matter will accept you. I'm not trying to show you how to fit in with everyone. I'm trying to show you how to preserve who you are, and equipped with some skills that we can do either through role plays or storytelling. So that's sort of been how I've taken this group over the 5 years that I've run it. Is I really try to cater it in a way that feels unique to each of them.
Sounds like the flexible and catering format of the group feels really empowering and really specific to students' needs, which I'm sure like increases their commitment to the group and feeling like they get what's exactly what they need out of it. That's pretty cool. And also sounds like, yeah, like you have to have some skill to be able to do that.
It was very intimidating at first. I really have to acknowledge that I didn't know if I can do the group, because I was like, there's so much that can come to me in a group that I have no idea how to. But it was like after a while, I was just like, okay, I feel like I'm better able to pivot and sort of address something in the moment.
I will ask one more question, and then we'll go to questions from the audience. So Ayanna, you specifically mentioned neurodiversity and neurodiverse members in your groups. For all of our panelists, so how having neurodiverse members typically affects the group, and is there does it differ depending on how many neurodiverse individuals you have, and what are some of the how do you manage like having a mixture of individuals as far as their abilities and neurodiversity? Why don't we start with Ayanna, since you've addressed this a little bit already?
Yes, so so we definitely have students from all different types of sort of neurology. So like I said, we are very welcoming to the CSP program, where their students are specifically diagnosed and in that program on campus. And so I get a lot of referrals from them. And so we didn't want to just create a group for just those who are diagnosed. I really wanted to make it more inclusive. And so I find that this is what works for me. And I really appreciate to know that I can also create a space where neurotypicals who just struggle with social challenges can be in a group and really feel like they don't have to feel like, oh, I shouldn't be in this group. The main goal is for everyone to learn skills, and depending on what every person comes in, we sort of learn through like lived experience or whatever they feel comfortable sharing, that even if we look different, or even if we have different externalizing behaviors or whatever, we all have common interests to build relationships, and meaningful ones at that. And so I think once those, because we've had some students who may feel like, oh no, I'm different from some of the students that I see, and that's fine. I do not convince anyone to stay in the group. If you feel like, oh, I saw someone who looks like they may be autistic and I don't feel comfortable, I don't beg people to stay in the group. If a person does not feel comfortable, that's totally their choice. I appreciate the ones who remain. And so I'm only focusing on the ones who remain. And so I think it's really important for me to see that they find out there's so much more in common that they have, even if they see differences in the room. And I've had some students who have a lot of different externalizing behaviors that may seem like as if they can be like distracting. So some students may have like a tic or something, or a sound that they make a lot in the group, or something where they may blurt out information, or they may blurt out whatever comes to mind. And I think that it's that level of acceptance and understanding, like, yes, we're all different, but yes, we all are here for a common goal. And I want to see that inclusivity in a lot of different spaces. I don't want to segregate or separate things too much. And I think that's been really helpful when I see students work together in a way where they just want to build up their self-confidence and they want skills. That's sort of what they want. They want skills and they want to be able to express themselves. And so that's the reason why students on the spectrum, they get a lot out of it. And students who may not be on the spectrum, they get a lot out of it too. I just get really good feedback from the group. So I try not to change anything that I see is working.
Yeah, sounds like this format can really help students with reduction of stigma, but also with acceptance of differences, just so valuable, especially with how much stigma there is around neurodiversity. Andrew, how about in your role for Insight? How does neurodiversity come into play? How many members neurodiverse, and how do you manage differences in neurodiversity?
Yeah, sure. So oftentimes our split is like 50-50, if not skewed towards neurodiverse a little bit more. It just depends on the group. One of my favorite things about having kind of a mixed diversity group like that is whenever we have clients who are maybe having social skills already, but are afraid to interact and engage, and folks who are maybe on the opposite, who need social skills and feedback and are unafraid. Something that we've seen is those folks who maybe do have social skills and do have social anxiety feel kind of more called to help out and give feedback to others, giving them some exposure. And those who are unafraid and really wanting to get feedback from others get that support, and kind of helping encourage the ones who are more anxious to come out of their shells a little bit more. And I think that this goes kind of across the span too for folks who are presenting differently in neurodiversity, who have differences in how much therapy or previous social skills groups they've done, and just plainly between if they feel socially anxious or not. I'd say our challenges are pretty commiserate with a lot of other kind of mixed neurodiversity groups. Naturally, some people might need more direct guidance and intervention than some others. Some problems or presentations might dominate session content, but that's always something we can process and grow from too. We had a moment in a group recently where that led to our storming phase. And just by pointing that out and recognizing it and pushing them to work into reforming, it ended up with like a really precious therapy moment. This is definitely a highlight for group. So for some clients who need a lot of individual attention, this is where I'd plug Drs. Son and Towers here in their groups. We often recommend folks join maybe a traditional social skills group or do concurrent individual coaching or therapy. Sometimes we actually meet with the clients outside for consultations or talk about like goal setting for the week, process what happened, what we noticed. We use a lot of disclosure like that too to support members. And yeah, one of our big hopes is that in using tabletop role-playing games, since we're kind of doing a simulation and playing a game, we do get kind of more that natural environment to practice social skills, or at least it feels like we're not doing therapy right now, catches people kind of off guard, lets them be in a more unstructured thing where we can immediately give feedback to them or catch them interacting how they do outside a group.
Andrew, I'm curious, for students who are on autism spectrum, how do you help them generalize specifically from the role playing like in the game to like out of game, because that can be a no difficulty with ASD?
Definitely, yes. So one kind of neat thing that we got to do in this last year, we noticed in one of our groups that everybody kind of shared this commonality of like feeling really isolated out of the group, and they were really bemoaning the fact that after group would end, they wouldn't be able to hang out with people anymore. And me and my co-facilitator just kind of looked at each other and we're like, y'all could just hang out with each other outside of group, just with the contract that we come back in and talk about it. So one big example, we had a member who would interject and interrupt quite frequently. He was on the autism spectrum, and we noticed that first in group, and we're able to work on it with a lot of open communication and direct feedback. That was another example where socially anxious members worked on building up the courage to confront and talk about that member, and he got some really good feedback. And then when they started hanging out socially, that same thing happened, but in the social group. And we had another conversation about it because we challenged those socially anxious members again to bring it up with this person in group. And for what I know, they still hang out after group ended for the semester. So I really like to echo to like a lot of what I saw at Dr. Son's presentation. If skills don't get used outside of group, skills don't grow. That's something I think that I'm going to actually take away from this presentation and learn about from both of you all.
Hilary, if you have quick words about that in your group.
I
so
honestly
feel
feel like Ayanna and Andrew captured anything I would have said, so I don't have much to add. That was really well said by both of you. So yeah, I don't have much to add to that.
Okay, well, let's jump into questions from the audience then. So there's one question that came up from a couple of individuals in terms of how you sell your group to students, especially, and how do you get buy-in? If you can maybe even, there's a request for like a role play, but if you can maybe say like the script, like what you would usually say to a student to help them understand what the group is about and to try to get the buy-in. I don't know who may be willing to do that for us.
I could start. First off, I wanted to mention that because we have such a large student body, we can't hold sort of individual therapy groups as frequently as we would like. So our big sell for our groups is that it's weekly. And some students, once they hear that they can be seen frequently, that makes them feel more comfortable to say like, oh, okay, even though I can't see you, Dr. Towers, for another 2 or 3 weeks, at least I know I have a group that is sort of can fit my needs and I can really get that social connection that I want. So that's a big sell for a lot of students. It doesn't even have to be for this group. It's just that some students want to be seen weekly in our counseling program. But when we talk about our groups, that it's a weekly thing, they get sort of excited, and that's a way that we sell that, and then we can sign them up. Another part of how we can do that is that when we talk about the skills level, a lot of students we found really like the idea of building skills. Because it's like you can't, once you know a skill, you can't like not have the skill. So it's like a forever thing. So it's like, this doesn't have to be a forever thing, but why don't you try this for this semester? And because I run the group each semester, it's like, okay, well, I could give it a try. And so they're more likely to say like, okay, I love the idea of me learning some skills and me being able to take it with me beyond college. I can use this in my workplace. I can use this at home. I can use it wherever I need to. So I think that's a big point for me, that students really like the idea of learning something new that they can take with them beyond college. And so those are the 2 things that come up for me when I sort of sell the groups, is knowing that they can be seen more frequently here, that they can potentially build some lifelong skills.
Yeah, I would say something that I've seen just being at the College Counseling Center, this one for the last 6 years, is the best way to sell group is to sell it to the staff. So if the staff is like sold out, like they understand the purpose of the group, they actually believe that group is sometimes often the better treatment than individual therapy, then they sell it to their students. And so what I saw as a shift in our center, and a lot thanks to Kseniya, is that we had a bunch of trainings to our staff on what are these groups, why are they important, why is this sometimes actually the preferred treatment, not individual therapy. And when they believed that, they sold that to our students, and then our students believed it, and we're like, wow, this is the thing for me, this is the best thing. For this particular skills group, I think one of the main things is that it's only 6 weeks. So it's like, you can come for 6 weeks. If you hate it, it's done. Like it's part of your semester and it's finished. And that it is just skills. So it's not as much of like if someone's like worried about taking risks, you don't really have to take that many risks. You don't have to share. Literally, we'll have members show up and we always give options to pass, and they just absorb. They pass a lot on practicing the skills, but they've absorbed a lot of stuff, you know? And so I think that gives an easy out for like if it's too scary, you can just try this thing and just soak in some things.
Well, I want to echo a little bit of what Dr. Son just said, and plug some of my colleagues that I see in the video display. We have a triage model here, so thankfully a lot of my good colleagues do the selling for me, and they've done a fabulous job. I've gotten a lot of referrals. I think one thing about maybe this generation in particular, or just the fact that role-playing games have had a moment, is not everybody knows what group therapy is. They see it as kind of this scary, amorphous thing. I'm going to have to open up in front of other people. But they do know what role-playing games are or what D&D is, and a lot of them come in with that frame. They know how to play the game, or they've always wanted to learn, and it's like an exciting thing. And then, we lure them in with the game and then trick them into therapy. But I'd say that's a big thing. We also sell a lot of the time that like everybody in the group also struggles with social anxiety. Everybody in the group also feels alone or rejected or wants to work on building connections with other people. I think hearing that for a lot of members makes them a lot more willing to join in on group. Sometimes I sell it too as like a stepping stone. Like if the goal is to get them into a USO group, well, why don't we try this first since it's a little more structured, or it's kind of a sweeter deal since the focus isn't going to be on you, it's going to be on your character and on the game. And some people too, I come at it from like a creative expression sort of lens. They get really interested with the idea of like playing a character and putting on a different persona and telling a story in that way. So it honestly just depends on the buy-in or what the person's looking for. I've also had to explain what D&D is. Like, we had a fella come in once who thought that the group was about playing ping pong somehow. Couldn't tell you. Yeah, I'd say I tailor it every time, and I'm still retooling it as we go.
Andrew, on that note, I have a couple of follow-up questions for you. So roles for insight, what game is it based on specifically? Which one?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So initially, we started off playing Dungeons and Dragons. I have some training under my belt from the Game to Grow model, and they predominantly used D&D. But as time has gone on, I shifted to a role-playing game called Masked: A New Generation. It's a teen superhero role-playing game that's a lot less emphasized on the rules and more emphasized on acting. What's really cool about Masked is instead of like hit points or damage points, you actually mark off on different emotions and then have to role play that emotion. And there's all kinds of little fun things like that there. An influence system where you have to say like, this character means a lot to my character, and because of that, I'm going to go with what they say, or I care what they think about me. So we're always kind of retooling and trying different things, I think, but that's kind of where we're landing on currently.
Andrew, do you mind typing the name of that in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Follow us, thank you. And I'll ask you another question as far as, I'll let you type, sorry. Too many things going on at once.
I wanted
Right.
to add one more thing too, so I wasn't sure. Okay. So I also wanted to know that part of the group, or what makes it successful, is that I humanize the whole experience of just sort of expressing any sort of things that you are representing, just the level of vulnerability. So I do self-disclosure in my group as far as just telling them that I have anxiety, and that this is something that I work on, and I've sort of developed skills to be able to still achieve the things that I want and not have my anxiety hold me back. So I think that's been one of the biggest parts of the feedback that I've received, is that they say like, oh, okay, well, if the facilitator of this group, who's a psychologist, can say that she gets anxious, then this makes me feel more this just makes me feel better to know like, oh, wow, she is able to achieve things because she's in this position or whatever may have you. So I think that that's also been sort of shown to be just to humanize what my role is, and to know that I'm not immune to any of the things that they also go through. So that's why I said I like to create that level of, okay, even though we all look different, even though we all present differently, we all have a lot of similarities. And so I think that that has really helped sort of break the ice and just break this level of just othering or feeling like you're different or that something's wrong with you.
So speaking of peer-to-peer support and normalizing that, Andrew mentioned that members of the group can socialize with each other outside of group. Ayanna and Hilary, what about in your groups?
Yeah, that's also allowed in my group as well. And we have had members get really close and hang out afterwards. And then we've had members who, you know, just kind of walk out separately and go their own ways. So.
Yeah, we definitely encourage that. We're not just asking them to practice outside a group with other people, but we say like, okay, if you want to form relationships with the group members that you're sitting with. So we definitely keep that as far as just something that we let the students know that this is a really good start here. Just the people that you're in the group with. So when I see students walk out together, I'm just like, oh yes, like I secretly am in the background, like cheering them on, because I like to see that that chatter outside a group when they leave.
Yeah, it sounds very, very valuable for them to be able to continue practicing once the group is over. Another question I have related to neurodiverse students who are in your groups. How do you talk about developing social skills without feeling like you're encouraging masking, especially for students with ASD?
I don't know that this is something I do just for students with ASD, because I think a lot about culture too, and like, what are we doing to adapt to the environment we're in? And anytime we adapt to an environment, where there's also a cost to ourselves and something that we shift. And I think Ayanna was talking about this too, of like, I'm not encouraging you to be someone that you're not. And so I just in general, when we talk about all of these concepts in the group, I talk about, think about like what is going to be best for you, and whether that's the choice to, in this environment, I'm going to choose not to express my emotion because that's not actually appropriate and I won't get what I need, but it'll feel bad to also have to hold it in. Like there's cost benefit, or, hey, I'm going to try this because that's what works for me. And I believe that it's what's right for me and it's what I value, even if other people don't receive it. And so I don't know that I specify it to students with ASD. It's more of a conversation of, hey, there's going to be cost benefits either direction, whether you adapt or don't adapt to whichever environment you're in, and you're going to have to be flexible because environments are constantly changing. And you might be in one environment with your peers and then a different one at home, you know? And so find a way that's going to work for you. What I really, really want to encourage and what the triangle of conflict really is about is like have some choice and insight and awareness of it instead of it happening to you and being automatic and impulsive. So yeah, that's kind of a way I talk about it in the group in general.
Yeah, I agree with everything Hilary just said, because I think that like she reiterated, is I really don't want them to feel like they have to be someone else. That's sort of like the first thing I talk about in the first group when they're all sitting with me, is that I'm not trying to change who you are. I'm not trying to change your likes, your interests. I'm not trying to change any of that. I'm here to help you build self-confidence for you to feel like you can achieve your own goals in life. And if you feel like you want to do more in your social life, I can help you with that and build some skills. But I really want them, again, to preserve their authenticity. For students on the spectrum, it's so interesting. I had a student who was actually on the spectrum who said that he felt very uncomfortable because he didn't like the role plays, felt very like he had to be on stage. And so his situation was actually a little bit different because he was diagnosed ASD, but stated that he no longer had it. So that was like I had to like consult with his therapist as far as just like what he was working through as far as his own stigma of ASD. But for those who really, for those, whether they had a diagnosis or not, they did really see the value in just like the idea of building skills and not sort of pretending to be someone that they're not. So I think that they were really able to see that differentiation, that I'm helping you build skills. I'm not trying to help you mask or pretend to be someone you're not. And so yeah, that was just a situation that I encountered recently, but I really want to I really try to hone that in that first group, as far as I'm not trying to have you pretend to be someone you're not.
Something I think about and find a little tricky is figuring out the line between when do we help students adapt to function in the environment and when we need to encourage them to help environment adapt to them. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Like, is there a point where you would say to student, like, environment needs to, like, people around you also need to do better to understand how you function interpersonally, as opposed to you changing to fit somebody else's preferences or ways of communication?
Yeah, I would say, like, thinking about kind of the mixed neurodiversity groups as well, that's one of the beauties of having folks of different neurodiversity in a group, is so much of it is coming to understand each other and like how we navigate social space, how we see the world, how we process. So I think it's often challenging. We hear stories all the time about different campus events or classes or facilities not accommodating all students, but I think at the very least, whenever we work with each other in group and like maybe bring in some of the neurotypical members in to see and understand what their peers go through as neurodiverse individuals, that can be a small way. I like to, we talk about social microcosm a lot in group therapy. If we can bring in kind of the microcosm and expand it outward, so those people won't live in a vacuum, ideally, after getting social skills training and learning to connect with others better. I think that's how we can maybe even just chip away with some bigger social change. That'd be kind of my response to that one.
Yeah, I'll talk on just a little bit. I concur with that. And again, I think of it just in the broad context of diversity, not just for ASD, of like, there are so many environments where we can ask for others to adapt to us as well as adapt to the environment. We only have control over ourselves, right? And so I'll acknowledge that with students, like, hey, if it feels worth the risk to ask this person or these people to adapt to you, to share why you want or need to be seen in this way or interpreted this way, like, take the risk. If it doesn't feel worth the risk, then we're going to grieve that they're not going to adapt to you, or if you take the risk and then they still don't adapt to you, then it's grief. And so I think even in a skills group, I'll mention like kind of the grief and the sadness of like, hey, you may have to adapt and then you'll grieve that you had to change, or you may ask them to adapt and they don't, and you grieve that they won't. And then you figure out how to manage it. Do you stay in that environment? Do you have to stay in it? Because a lot of them have to stay in the environments, right? Or the rest of the world, the rest of their lives. So I will highlight grief when we talk about this, that there's, again, cost benefits and we grieve costs.
We have another 6 minutes. We'll continue talking, but I did put in the chat again the link for consultation group signups through our SIG and the link to our short feedback survey. So please complete it at the end of this program. Continuing talking about diversity within groups and different abilities, I'm going to here combine two questions into one. So diversity is great, and also at some points people may be on vastly different developmental levels, especially intellectually and cognitively. So there's one participant who says, I'm worried about people at lower levels keeping up and having to slow down people at higher developmental levels, and how to support everyone with different needs. On that note, what are your exclusion criteria for the group? With respect to that, but maybe also other exclusion criteria that are not related to cognitive ability and neurodiversity.
I don't have any right now. So I think like right now, I'm like, if something doesn't work, then I'll develop an exclusion criteria. But at this point, like if someone thinks that they can benefit from getting some skills, we'll try it. So currently, I don't have exclusion criteria. I might have like clinical judgment thoughts about it. So like if someone is super high risk and needs something in addition to group, but it's not an exclusion. It's kind of like a, hey, you need them under their risk while they're in group, so keep them in individual therapy or something like that. But I currently don't have exclusions. And I don't do screenings. So there's also not like a way to necessarily exclude people. Just kind of like put them in there and see what happens.
Yeah, my exclusion criteria is pretty much if I feel like there's risk. That's the only thing that I could say is something that, as far as risk of, if I feel like there's, like I do like a whole risk assessment in the other part of the screening that I do. That's in our EMR system. If a student is very depressed to the point where they're always having suicidal ideation, so I may follow up with their therapist. So I would definitely say that one of the criteria I do make known to the clinician is that they are in active therapy so that they're not coming in, bringing in a lot of the things that they can be talking about with their individual therapists. So I do a lot of consulting with individual clinicians if I find that there's something that comes up, but so far, I haven't had something where I had to exclude someone or tell them that they were not a good fit. It would just be me working with their clinician, me making sure that they're seeing someone regularly if they have some things that that they need to talk about on a more private individual basis. Yeah.
And anything more to add as far as having students in the group who have very different ability levels where that may be challenging to navigate, and how do you get everyone's needs met?
Yeah, for as far as the different abilities, I think sometimes it is very clear in some groups, and then it's not clear at all. So every group, every semester can look so different for me. And so I get different students, like I said, every semester, and I may get some returning. But the students there really see the value and just sort of the skills that I can bring for them. But as far as the different abilities, I think that if I find that the student is not gaining anything, or if I do some check-ins with the student who I may find may struggle, if they feel like they're getting something out of it, and I want them to get whatever they can get out of the group. And so I wouldn't say like just because I find someone may have higher needs that or it's such a drastic difference that they are no longer a good fit for the group. It's just a matter of me checking in with that student or me checking in with any other student as far as how the group is going and do they feel like they're getting something out of the group. So it's just a constant feedback that I get.
And Ron, I think we have time for you to briefly answer this question, and then we'll wrap up our program on that note.
Yes, was the original question.
Exclusion criteria and worries about people having different abilities as far as cognitive abilities and neurodiversity.
Sure, yeah, I would say my exclusion criteria are pretty similar to Dr. Towers and Dr. Son's. I think one thing that I do take into consideration is the individual client oriented to all spheres. And if they do experience anything such as like psychosis, delusions, hallucinations, are they getting treatment? Just because we do go into like fantasy play and imagination play, and it's important to kind of recognize the difference between the two. But it's fully possible for just about any individual to be part of the group. So I'd say apart from like severe risk or severe like client needs immediate treatment, we are pretty open-ended, and we've seen pretty diverse ranges in terms of presentation. I encourage a lot of the other members to help with the therapy too. So I mentioned earlier, one of our members who would interrupt a lot, I'd say he was a lot more kind of pronounced in his symptoms than some of our other neurodiverse members. So part of the group cohesion came around working together and like understanding each other more, accommodating each other more. That's another beautiful thing that we can do, practice. Hey, this person's different from me. How can I accommodate them rather than make them feel excluded or rejected?
Thank you. So thank you all to all of our participants for being with us today. Again, the recording will be available at some point within a month. You will receive it on the email that you used to sign up for this event. Please fill out the feedback survey, and have a good rest of your week and rest of your Wednesday. And I'm asking panelists to stay back to debrief.